to come in as they wish. Okay, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear national ozone officers and staff of Montreal Protocol units, colleagues from implementing agencies, speakers, experts, and collaborators. Welcome to UNEP OzonAction's 35th online meeting. And today we will focus on the national plans for the collection, transport, and disposal of used or unwanted controlled substances. The meeting is part of the activities of UNEP OzonAction Montreal Protocol Network for Europe and Central Asia, in short, the ECA network. I will kindly ask everybody to mute themselves. I will go through that a little bit later on, but for courtesy of everyone, please keep your mics muted. Thank you. We're excited to have you here today with us. My name is Natasha Kochova, and I'm happy to be your facilitator for today's meeting. I'm also joined by my colleagues, ECA Network Coordinator, Mr. Halvard Koppen, and Ms. Mogure Kibe. Allow me now to go over some of the meeting objectives, even though they may be a little self-explanatory, but it will be a good opportunity to see what's ahead of us. Okay. So for today's meeting, the aim is to list the requirements for this project, to assist countries towards preparing the plan and to have these elements available for creating a national strategy. We will hear experiences coming from Hungary, Poland, also Daikin. It will be a platform where we can exchange information and knowledge on the topic of circularity of refrigerants and circular economy and life cycle of refrigerants. We will also have an opportunity to ask questions, to discuss, maybe address any challenges that countries have identified thus far. And we will share the status of one or few countries at the end of the meeting. So the outcomes is really the ultimate outcome will be the plan or the strategy on what could be done on how to deal with these activities that are part of this project, how this can be regulated with certain policies and regulations, and really to get an overall picture of how refrigerant life cycle management is taking place. So we have a nice rich agenda today with 5 interventions. I will be starting us off with the requirements for the preparation of inventory of banks of used or unwanted controlled substances, which will be followed by Ms. Gabriela Zalai from Daikin, Hungary. She will take us through circularity of refrigerants and particularly a case study from Hungary. This will be followed by Mr. Hrvoje Krapanic from Daikin, Central Europe. He will speak to us about the circular economy and life cycle of refrigerants. So how to protect the environment with proper refrigerant handling, very important topic. And we will also have Mr. Krzysztof Grzegorczyk from Prozon, Poland, who will also speak on life cycle approach to refrigerants. In this case, it will be the experiences from Poland and from Prozon on refrigerant RRR, waste, and destruction options available. And finally, we will finish off with Ms. Liana Kahramanyan from Armenia National Ozone Unit with sharing of their country experiences on this project. And of course, we invite other countries who wish to take the floor. Very briefly, online meeting etiquette. This is clear, but I think it's also good that we're reminded to keep ourselves muted during the interventions, please. You will have time for discussion and Q&A during the allocated time after the interventions. Please use the raise hand button if you'd like to take the floor, which would be my preference as a moderator to see you also interacting with me and the rest. But you can also write in the chat if you wish. As always, this meeting is with interpretation, English and Russian. Please select the appropriate channel at the bottom of the screen for transmission and this meeting is recorded. So without much further ado, let me go straight into my presentation on the inventory of banks of used or unwanted controlled substances. So the plan for collection, transport, and disposal of these substances. I will focus on XCOM document 91/66, specifically decision 90/49C. Of course, there are other documents and decisions that are intertwined in this, but we will focus mainly on this. And I will try to make it as little legal as possible in terms of terminology, I mean. So this next slide, it's familiar to most of you who have been at previous online meetings. Here we have the status of approved projects for the inventory of banks of used or unwanted controlled substances in our ECA region. So congratulations to these 8 countries that have their projects already approved. And you can also see the implementing agency that stands for the support during implementation. This MLF new funding window for this project, the eligibility falls for Article 5 countries, which also includes our ECA countries. And this focuses mainly on having inventories of banks of controlled substances. So really the ultimate goal is to determine the size of these banks, how to develop strategies or the development of strategies to control for the sound management of waste and controlled substances, activities which are related to this, including disposal options, integration of waste controlled substances into national hazardous waste programs. So you can see here synergies being done and also alignment with already existent options available, or maybe finding also a joint way forward, and development of a business model and co-financing. So here we can take into account these specific paragraphs, part of another document and another decision, which also ties in to the decision that I will be speaking in the next slides. And here it's important also to note the lessons learned from previous ODS disposal projects, including the integration of these hazardous waste rules and regulations. And now that we speak about these previous ODS disposal projects, there was a partnership done a few years ago with UNEP Environment and UNIDO targeting 3 beneficiary countries. You see that on the map to the left in orange, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro, where there was an ODS disposal project taking place. And here you can see the components. There's 4 components in total, but it goes anywhere from aggregation of this ODS waste to transportation of it, to establishment of a regional cooperation forum on disposal options, and also awareness raising. So this project, the results of it are quite nice and interesting. So in total, 41.37 metric tons of refrigerant waste were destroyed among the 3 countries in total, I mean, and including 32.79 metric tons of ODS waste. You can see here in the table, this was done in 3 batches, 2 going to Poland, 1 headed to Germany at the time. And when we talk about expenditures, you can see that at the bottom, the cost effectiveness of the project was $8, I'm rounding up here, $8 per kilogram, which exceeded the initially expected cost effectiveness of $12 per kilogram. And some of the lessons learned, you see the link at the bottom, so you can access this fact sheet and you can see in more details the information. Here it's only extracted, but some of the lessons learned is that there is an issue with aggregation of ODS waste at regional level. So in terms of classification, but also import-export procedures, whether this is banned or not. And here you see also in the red, I've placed this, there's this issue also of whether certain things are exempted or whether there's a destruction facility options. Re-export many times can be also a challenge. Recovery recycling schemes are essential for the successful disposal activities. Storage cylinders are needed. Certification of the servicing companies is also a requirement. And what was found is that it is not economically feasible to separate ODS waste from non-ODS waste prior to destruction. Chemical analysis of the waste is also important, not only to identify the quantity of ODS waste in mixtures, but also the destruction costs of unknown waste mixtures, which can be quite higher. So you see here 25 to 30% higher. Parameters for destruction of facilities, inspections here, getting environmental inspectors involved, and also how it can be managed with certain maybe environmental taxes to subsidize the sound disposal of refrigerant waste in the long term, so it becomes sustainable. And here an example of Croatia. But going back to this project that we talked about in the first slides, it is of course, the final product is to have these national inventories and an action plan. And it is to be completed within a 2-year period after it has been approved, and no later than 6 months after completion, the final report and all this as a package is to be submitted. These projects have already, as you can see, started. We have the 8 already approved in our ECA region. So back in 2023, at the 93rd EXCO meeting, they started, and they will be up for acceptance up until and including the 97th EXCO meeting, which is end of next year, 2025. I will, as I said, focus on EXCOM document 91/66 in this particular decision here. The funding criteria is contained in this document, and the development of these national inventories and plans as a guidance is contained in that decision with paragraphs 16 to 32. And I will break down these paragraphs in the next slides. And of course, we need to keep in mind that this could include also consideration of recycling, reclamation, and cost-effective destruction options. And some of the presentations that you will hear later on today will include this component and what is available in our region. So this is the title page of this lovely document, which is, well, it's fairly extensive, but it's very useful to know and to have. And this was from the 91st meeting back in 2022. So if we look at this decision 90/49B, and here specifically paragraph 16 to 29, again, I'm simplifying here for the purpose of time and how much information a slide could really contain. But if you want more information, please refer to this decision and these specific paragraphs. But when it comes to key components to the preparation of national inventories, here we need to have as a starting point, of course, the national inventory. And this something that comes quite a bit through the document is this consultation with relevant stakeholders. And this is not only for one particular step or one, part of the mosaic, but throughout the whole process. Also, when we look at the methodology, the data collection and the analysis, relevant stakeholders need to be involved during this process to be a part of it and to enrich it and give, the right picture. Also, approaches used in the collection of waste-controlled substances, so how to identify effective collection mechanisms, and all the while reviewing domestic regulations that are in place, or programs that are in place already supporting waste management, which will be, most likely handled by different departments, part of the same ministry or administration, and then having this national inventory report. And then if we look at paragraphs 30 to 32, I know it doesn't seem many paragraphs here in terms of number, but the information is there and it's extensive. So the national plan, there are certain elements that would need to contain. Of course, the source and the banks. So this is really the inventory itself. Also description of existing and required policies that we talked about, but including recovery and recycling and reclamation where this might be applicable. Having concrete activities, the responsible actors that will be involved. And here, this next point is also quite important, is assessing the technology options for disposal, including destruction, and what the best practices could be and opportunities for co-disposal of waste-controlled substances with other hazardous waste. So here, example was given with POPs, persistent organic pollutants. Especially this might be applicable or of interest to countries with very small odious waste streams. So then you can just merge in a sense. Also understanding the barriers for the establishment of domestic destruction and capacity and export. And again, this comes to the legislation, or if there's any exemptions, or what we're going to do with re-export if there is such things. Addressing the institutional framework. This again ties in with the policies, but also extending to include eventual disposal and options identified for monitoring and verification procedures, and the cost considerations of disposal, which are not small. So that too needs to be well thought out. And if we zoom in and deep dive into the national plan itself, as we said, it would consider the development of regulations, but also we keep here in mind the national phase out and phase down plans. So the HPMPs that are currently and the stages that they're at with the different countries, or the KIPs that have also started. And here with the focus of refrigerant recovery, recycling, and reclamation. Here taking in the national legislation and policies that could be strengthened or anew created. Another point is, in addition to what we already talked about, specifically for the destruction of waste-controlled substances, it would need to contain also a description of a potential model. And again, we come back to the stakeholders, the involvement of them, and detailing this arrangement, also with the private sector and what the commitment there would be as a life cycle approach. So from waste collection to eventual destruction of these substances. And where the national plans identified export for destruction as the most effective disposal option, this would also need to be in line or in tune to the transboundary movement of waste and the conventions that regulate that. Which brings me to my last slide, almost. So this final plan, national plan, or as a summary, we already broke it down in terms of what the requirements are, but just to tie it in, so really the legislation, the involvement of different groups, also the roles and obligations that are for these certain groups, and including this recovery and recycling and reclamation programs. And you see here a little graphic with reduce, reuse, and recycle, which is, of course, tied to circular economy concepts. And here, maybe you see it with different aspects presented, like products, plastics, fashion, garments. But this is also applicable with this type of work and the use of the refrigerants and what can be done. Yeah. Can we please mute? Thank you. I can't see. Thanks. And having that in mind, that, you know, we start off with reduction, reuse, recycle, reclaim, and you will hear a little bit more about that from the technical presentations which will follow. So thank you for your participation. You can gather additional information about ECA network activities and OzonAction as well at these meeting portals and websites. So with that, I will end my intervention here. And before we proceed, ask if there are any questions or comments. We can also have them later if you'd wish, but before proceeding, I'll give a moment there. Okay, I don't see anybody with their hand raised, and my colleagues will help me out also if there's any comments in the chat, which I don't see. So then we will proceed with the next presentation, which will be delivered by Ms. Gabriela. She's the Environmental Advocacy Manager at Daikin, Hungary. And today she will present the circularity of refrigerants as case study from Hungary. And Ms. Gabriela, you're very quick and fast, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you confirm that you see my slides and also hear me well?
Excellent.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the organizers to invite me and also for you joining this meeting. As Natasha already introduced me, I am Gabriela Szalai, working from Daikin, Hungary for over 5 years. Also closely cooperating with Mr. Hrvoje Krapanic, who will follow me as speaker today. And I also seen here in the audience, so greetings from Hungary to all of you. I brought you a case study from Hungary, how the status of recovered refrigerant changed 2 years ago and what trends we see as a consequence in Hungary. I prepared these slides. I have 18 slides altogether, which would take, I think, circa 20 minutes, and left time for questions as well. Some of you already know the Hungarian case study, but I try to give you more details on the advocacy process, as well as on a bit of the follow-up on the market behavior after the decree has changed. So I would say it could be a kind of breakthrough in the implementation rules of trading by recovered refrigerants in Hungary, since the implementation rules for handling and trading recovered refrigerant changed significantly. The status of the recovered refrigerant stayed significantly. The government amending the decree on condition of activities with fluorinated greenhouse gases and ozone depleting substances, making trade with recovered refrigerant and reclaimed refrigerant a real alternative at national level. The amendment took effect in August 12, 2022. That means we have 2 years of experience already with the new amended legislation. And overall, the amended rules makes trading with recovered refrigerants simpler, cheaper, and more efficient by maintaining a high level of environmental protection. Before the amendment, namely, transport and handling of recovered refrigerant has been done by license of handling hazardous waste. And this actually meant a real bottleneck for circularity of refrigerants. Installers were reluctant to handle especially smaller quantities of recovered refrigerants due to uncertain legalities and high additional transport costs. Reclamation and disposal facilities did not accept recovered F-gases without special transport certificate, since it needed transported as hazardous waste, and also it caused an economic feasibility bottleneck, since reclamation and disposal organized only over certain volume of recovered refrigerants, which cannot be actually collected due to the uncertainty of the legal situation. Even with previous F-gas quota phase down, a deficit of virgin refrigerant could be anticipated according to EPI, a European Partnership of Energy Efficiency HFC outlook model. With augmented F-gas phase down, a serious shortage could be expected, especially for servicing and maintenance of existing REC HP bank. Hungarian national expert team understood this issue. They agreed that member states should facilitate the recycling and reclamation of HFCs. Recycled and reclaimed gases are outside of the scope of the quota system, therefore can assist market needs. These activities relate to the main environmental targets as well, including climate protection and environmental protection. Advocacy efforts made under the umbrella of Life Plus program. This is the program is co-financed by the European Commission and Life Plus program, and the consortium consists of 4 entities, Daikin Central Europe and Daikin Europe, together with the National Technical University of Athens and a non-profit organization called Med4Energy. And as promised, I would like to give you an insight how the advocacy process has been done in Hungary or done in Hungary. Independent legal consultants assisted the business sector, and this legal consultant actually employed under the Life 3 project. The consultant made a legal environmental assessment, and what is a key part of the advocacy process and also the legal assessment, made a comparison between waste framework regulation and also F-gas regulation. And this consultant also were involved in shaping the legal proposal. I initiated the advocacy process as Daikin Advocacy Manager under the EU project, and I were directly involved during the whole negotiation process. The the governmental stakeholders who were involved in the negotiation process were really very helpful, and actually without them, this whole process or the whole amendment wouldn't have been able to be done. So first of all, I contacted the state secretary who were responsible for F-gas regulation as legislative authority. Also, the state secretary involved the ministry department responsible for F-gas regulation as also in the place as legislative body. And one more authority were involved. This is Authority for Climate Protection, which are responsible, or the team of this authority responsible for F-gas implementation rules as supervising body in Hungary. And what's more, Ministry Department on Waste Regulation were consulting during the process. But it's important to emphasize they were consulted, but and you will see the advocacy has been done under the F-gas implementation rules, and the changes has been done under the F-gas implementation rules in Hungary. The negotiation process took one and a half, 2 years, and the amendment only impacted implementing act to national F-gas degree. What is more and also important, a stakeholder involvement as initiated by the Authority for Climate Protection. Producers, manufacturers, service companies, refrigerant distributors, and reclamation facility were also involved in this in the negotiations, and it was handled very carefully, since there were some stakeholders, especially with license, with special environmental for transporting and dealing with hazardous waste, who were opposed to the changes because it was impacted their market position, and because they were actually profited from the previous status quo. What really made a difference is when the legal consultant compared F-gas regulation and waste legislation and came up with a legal proposal as well. And the unique resolution was that the intention of recovery process need to be clarified, because waste is any substance or object which the owner discards, intends to discard, or required to discard. Substance, product, or byproduct becomes waste when it leaves the production use cycle. That also means if the purpose of recovery is to keep the refrigerant in circulation, so the purpose is regeneration, reclamation, recycling of the refrigerant, it does not become waste and therefore not subject to waste management rules. This is very important it was a very important statement, or which was actually accepted by the Hungarian expert team. And that was the key behind the change of the legislation, because the Hungarian national expert team agreed that if the purpose of the F-gas recovery is keeping the refrigerant in circulation, then this activity should not be regulated under the waste management, but via F-gas implementation rules, since HFC categories are virgin substances, recycled substances, reuse of the recovered fluorinated greenhouse gas following a basic cleaning process, reclaimed substances, which match the performance of a virgin substance, or distracted substances where permanently transforming or decomposing FGHGs into substances that are not fluorinated greenhouse gases. It's upon the decision of the owner what should be done with recycled HFCs, and this decision determines the legal status of the refrigerant. So, if the recovery of refrigerant for reclamation purposes and their transport for reclamation is regulated, but as a non-waste activity, which is a significant improvement for the environment. So you see in this chart that if the recovered refrigerant is recycled into the same circuits, then it's not waste. If the recovered refrigerant reclaimed and can be used into any circuits, then it's again not waste. Recovered refrigerant only becomes waste if it's impossible to reclaim and need to be destructed, then it becomes waste and it will be handled as hazardous waste. So this is the only case when the handling of recovered refrigerant remained the same as it was before. So recovered refrigerant only handled hazardous waste if it cannot be kept in circulation. This was a huge impact in handling in the handling of recovered refrigerants, and impacted the whole HVACR sector and the bank of REC HP equipment in altogether. So what changed? The legislation is consistent. FGNG can be transported as product, should that be recovered for reclamation purposes. The amendment sets the deadline of 2 years from the date of recovery for the sale or transfer of refrigerant in this case, thus promoting efficient recycling and recovered gases. The collection, transport, and disposal of recovered refrigerant that become waste are still subject to the hazardous waste handling rules. However, in cases where the companies only perform collection or transportation activities without handling gas, it is ensured that they will not have to be F-gas certified in the future. Accordingly, the amendment creates a registration category called collector that allows the collection of transport without qualification in addition to those who are F-gas certified. When I noted that the legislation is consistent, this statement also includes the tagging of refrigerant routes. In Hungary, there is a mandatory, centralized, government-funded F-gas database. This database, introduced in 2015, the implementation and supervising body is the Authority for Climate Protection. I already mentioned this for you before. And they developed and handle F-gas database, developed and handle F-gas certificate requirements for installers, responsible for regular renewal of F-gas certificates, and participate in regular awareness-raising activities as well. F-gas database also used for tracking units and refrigerants. Routes of virgin in recovered HFCs need to be notified in the database, and this rule will be extended to HFOs and non-fluorinated refrigerants as well. Registering new HVACR units charged with HFCs and HFOs need to be notified in the database. And also this database allows to follow the life cycle of these products, of this equipment. E-logbook activities, including required leak checks, are also notified in the F-gas database. And this is also will be extended to HFOs under the new amended F-gas regulation. Units also connect service and recovery activities. The F-gas database also connects service and recovery activities to units. And all these current requirement is expected to be extended to non-fluorinated refrigerants from next year on, including training requirements for installers as well. F-gas database need to be regularly updated, maximum 8 days after any database-related activity need to be reported, and also leak checks mandatory according to F-gas regulations. Missed reporting of mandatory activity are fined by the Authority for Climate Protection. But I need to also note here that leaks in Hungary are not fined. But is also positive though, and as a side effect, I think also the amendment as well as the expected shortage of refrigerants and the expected price increase due to the shortage of HFCs, virgin HFCs, is that a slow behavioral change being experienced from stakeholders, especially those B2B sector, retail sector, for example, which has significant units installed. And the kind of mark self-regulation is in parallel with increasing prices and agency scarcity, service contracts starting to regulate financial consequence for refrigerant leaks as well. So I would say this is a kind of behavioral change, which is important to note. And with the amendment, the implementation rules and changes in F-gas database also added concerning reporting on unknown recovered blends. That means that unknown blends which not possible to determine in exact composition, which exact composition is not able to determine, is allowed to set at a later date when the proper composition can be noted, and then it can be actually notified in the F-gas database as well. Amending the regulation is a significant step for refrigerant circularity, but awareness raising and market and stakeholder education is also very important. Installers, service companies need time to adapt and also need credible sources to learn from. Therefore, an extensive awareness raising still necessary. And the Hungarian expert team also understood this need. They are regularly participate on events, participate in conferences during mandatory installer trainings as well, and they are actively part of market education, or which is very important for all the installers to understand the amended rules. But we also experiences new business opportunities occur for refrigerant circularity. This also, for example, leading reclamation facility increased its capacity, formerly reclaimed only non-flammable, even type refrigerants, and now they extended their service for A2 type refrigerants as well. And we also noted that new reclamation facility launched in Hungary, a former only dismantling facility offer newly founded reclamation services, including A2 type refrigerants as well. And as interesting, we have examples for take-back scheme for Lubbai-Daikin and Retradables platform. You will hear more about these take-back schemes from my colleague Hrvoje Krapanic, who will follow me in the presentations. And I give you the name of the team who is responsible for the change of regulation. First of all, the Ministry for Energy Affairs, Climate Policy Deputy State Secretary, Ms. Daniela Deli is the Deputy State Secretary. You see here her email address here. And also, again, I would like to give a great applause for the Authority for Climate Protection. This is a very potential team together with Mr. István Glück, Hermina Gordon-Kiss, and Ivan Szabó. They were great with helping with all the changes which happened in Hungary. Now I resume my presentation and have time for questions, I think. So please free to let me know if you have anything to ask from me. And I would like to stop sharing now, because then I will see you if you ask some questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniela, for this excellent presentation outlining the policy elements and the great work that Hungary has undertaken. It was useful to hear the amended rules of handling recovered refrigerant in Hungary and the handling hazardous waste, but also how to harmonize the definitions of the EU F-gas regulation with waste, and how to differentiate between something which is a product or waste. Also, it was quite relevant to hear on how to report these activities in case of recovered unknown blends. And I find this quite important because it might be fairly tricky, as there are many different blends available on the market. And also the advocacy, thank you for pointing the advocacy process as an important component involving the stakeholders. We mentioned them previously as well, and the role they play also towards behavioral changes. So maybe I stop here and allow anybody who would like to ask any questions. I see here we have, I don't see anybody with their hand up, but we do have a question in the chat, I believe. Just a moment. Yes, so we have a question from Mr. Lasha, and he's from Georgia. And he's asking, what happens after 2 years? Are the refrigerants treated as waste?
If it's not treated in 2 years, then it should be handled as hazardous waste and should be delivered for the disposal facility.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for
so
that.
Everybody actually should be interested for reclamation, or in reclamation in general, because then the transport, they can themselves transport it to the reclamation facility. On the other hand, if it's handled as hazardous waste, then it means that transportation, special license transportation need to be organized, which actually costs money, quite a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you for that. I see Halvar's hand raised. Halvar?
Yeah, thank you very much, Natasha and Gabriela, for that excellent presentation. A quick question. You mentioned that leaks in Hungary are not fined. I assume this is about unintended leaks. Can you confirm that venting is banned and that recovery and repair is mandatory?
Yes, for unintentional leaks, it's not fine. At the same time, you cannot actually differentiate when a leak is unintentional or intentional. So the as far as I understand, the intention of the Hungarian authorities or legislation body was to encourage proper notice of what's happening on the market, and not disencourage installers to use the F-gas database. That was behind it. I wouldn't say that intentional leakage not happening in Hungary yet. At the same time, what we see is that with the price increase of refrigerant, there is an economic need to collect the refrigerants. That means also it's an economic must to take care of the refrigerants, and hopefully, and also more or less as a kind of trend to keep it in circulation. I don't hear you.
We still don't hear you, Halvard, but maybe he's just thanking you. Thank you for that explanation, Gabriela, and for Halvard's question. Here in the chat, just to comment from Hilde. So as info, the issue when something is recovered, refrigerant waste or not, is described in the TEEP LRM Task Force report, page 69, and they have attached the document, so thank you for that. So for more info, you can download that, and also thanks to Jacques from Tradewater. So noting here that if any of you find CFCs, depending on the type and amount, Tradewater could offer to assist with collection, transport, disposal of them. And you can contact them in the chat. They've provided their contacts either in Russian or in English language. So that's pretty convenient. So thank you for that. And now, if we have no further questions, I'd suggest we move on to the next presentation, patiently awaiting Mr. Hrvoje Krapanic. He's the Senior Manager of Daikin Environment Research Center, the CEE, being the Central and Eastern European Department of Daikin. So we look forward to hear the views on circular economy and life cycle of refrigerants, protecting, of course, the environment with proper refrigerant handling. So the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Natasha. Thank you very much. Let me share the screen. Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and I would like to thank to the organizers for the opportunity for presenting, let's say, the industry position about the refrigerant handling during the life cycle of the refrigerant. As you already know for sure, and I think Gabi mentioned this a few times, refrigerants are very important considering CO2 emissions, and they are strongly monitored because preventing CO2 emission is utmost task of all of us. And the handling of the refrigerant has very important role in it, because the refrigerant actually is responsible for the emission only if it leaks. So we have to make sure that the proper refrigerant handling is really introduced wherever possible. So let's see, how does it look like with the average HVAC product in the equipment life cycle? What happens with the CO2 emission in the product life cycle? So basically, when we talk about the raw materials and transport, which includes the procurement of the parts, logistics, the people movement, we talk about 1% of the emissions connected to the product. Further, the just production, the manufacturing and development and the sales, those processes account for 0.4% of the CO2 emissions. Then we come to the usage phase. And during the usage phase, we talk about 79% of the CO2 emissions. So for one product, during the phase of use, we are facing 79% of the CO2 emissions connected to the product. And that's mostly, this is because of the energy consumption, which is happening during the use phase. And at the end, we have refrigerant emissions during the use phase and end of the life emissions. So both emissions, both CO2 emissions connected to the refrigerants are amounts to, let's say, on average, 19%. So if we talk about the last two, the usage and refrigerant emissions during the use phase and end of life, we talk about approximately 98% of the CO2 emissions connected to the product. And when we talk about this 19% of emissions connected to the refrigerant, we still have to assess it in detail, but the first assessments are saying that it's like 50% connected to the phase during the use, and it's connected to potential leakages, which can happen during the use phase. And end of the life is also part of the emissions which are happening. And this is because of, not correct recovery. And here in our calculation, the recovery rate is set very conservatively to 0% because the market data is not there. So we assumed in this calculation there is no actually refrigerant recovery, which is not true, but still refrigerant recovery and refrigerant reuse is still on a very low level. And this is why I think this is very important part. The use, the refrigerant handling is extremely important due to this factor. So 79% of CO2 emissions connected to energy consumed. Let me divert a little bit from the topic and just explain what happens here. So basically what we have here, this is the electricity which comes to the building, would come to the building for every purpose, but a big part of it is used for, let's say, heating and hot water preparation and for cooling. And here, example is a heat pump where we are using this electricity to start this heat pump. And then as we talk about the renewable energy, we have 3 kilowatts of free energy, which is coming from the ambient, the renewable energy. And then at the end, we get 4 kilowatts of heating energy. So basically 1 kilowatt input of the electricity. And then at the end, we get 4 kilowatts of heating. Of course, I've been very optimistic and put that the pictures of renewable energy sources when producing the electricity, but in reality, this is not so. So electricity is still being produced in a big percentage from fossil fuels. So basically also the 79% of CO2 emissions comes from the energy. And if we are decreasing the CO2 emissions from this energy, of course, we will be decreasing the CO2 emissions from the use phase of the product. That's why it's important to keep the high energy efficiencies, the products with high energy efficiencies, and of course, the products with renewable energy, which produce renewable energy when we think about decarbonization and reduction of CO2 emissions in general. Now I would like to just run through basic definitions, which I will be using through the presentation. I'm sure you know it, but also let's repeat a little bit. So the recovery of the refrigerant is taking refrigerant from the equipment to some bottles, cylinders, tanks. And the point is that every refrigerant should be taken out of the equipment and taken care of. Means we have to stream to reuse it. If not possible, then to destroy it. But every kind of refrigerant, including the natural refrigerants, which are more and more taking place on the market. Recycling of refrigerant is actually basic cleaning of refrigerant, and the refrigerant should not be too contaminated, because the basic cleaning is removing oil, acid, particulate matters, and the water. And such cleaned refrigerant can be used in the same or similar equipment. The good practice, according to European standard 378, says that every time refrigerant which is recovered from the unit before putting back to the unit needs to be recycled. But we all know this is not really the case, and that's why I think also from this point of view, we have to make sure that the people know that this is needed, and this is preventing the accidents, and prolonging, of course, the life of the equipment. Reclamation is a bit more complex process, which is where refrigerant is processed in a special facilities mostly. But at the end point is that the end of the processing, the refrigerant has the same specification, same quality as the original product. And this is measured by HRI 700 standard, which is American standard. Unfortunately, we don't have yet other standards, but this one is really okay for now. The reclamation as such can be simple recycling and phase balancing. If you have, for example, and the refrigerant for this case should be quite good quality before going to recycling only. So you recycle it to the level which is okay, and then you make sure that if we talk about the blend, that the phases in the blend of different refrigerants which are in the blend are in correct percentage to each other, so we can call it really the refrigerant which we want to have. Or the second part is going through the distillation process, which is a bit more complex process in the special facilities. And I will show a picture after that. Incineration is the process of destruction of the refrigerant by burning the refrigerant. Special processes, the temperatures go up to 1,200 degrees Celsius. So this is the process where we are making sure that the refrigerant is properly destroyed. I can show you a picture of our facility in Daikin Refrigerants in Frankfurt, in Germany, where we have the reclamation facility. And shortly, this is the process where we are separating from the different refrigerants in one tank. We are separating different refrigerants and putting in these big columns. It is very interesting how the process looks like. And we talk about the process which goes over the 6 floors, I think. So it's really impressive how it looks. And at the end, we do have a good experience with that. A little bit of a challenge here is to get the big quantities of refrigerant, which is required to come in bigger tanks like ISO tanks, which is not always easy to collect on specific market. So coming back to this, the refrigerants and refrigerants connected CO2 emissions. So when we talk about the life cycle of refrigerants, the part of this is, we have to make it as sustainable as possible. So basically the refrigerant coming from the first moment to the equipment, so it's filled in the equipment. Then during installation use phase, we have to make sure that the refrigerant remains in the unit. So it's important to have a good quality of the installation. During the use phase, we have to also make sure that our units and equipment is maintained properly, so we keep the proper functionality of the equipment. And end of the lifetime, we are recovering this refrigerant from the unit. And this is the part we are talking about today mostly. So basically, we take out the refrigerant from the unit. We recycle or reclaim, so we clean the refrigerant, process the refrigerant, and then we can reuse it again, putting back to the system, or in case of reclamation, we can use it in original charging of the equipment in the factories. If this is not possible, we can destroy the refrigerant, so properly dispose the refrigerant. But the idea is to reuse refrigerants as much as possible, because this is the sustainable way. Since there is no degradation in the refrigerant if we are reusing or recycling or reclaiming, that we can do it unlimited. So we can constantly reuse the refrigerant, and the initial properties of refrigerant will not be destroyed as such. And this is, of course, the good process where we are making sure that the refrigerant is reused. So we call it a circular economy of refrigerant. And of course, this prevents releasing refrigerant into the atmosphere, because this is actually happening still quite a lot. What might be the challenges, some of the challenges which we face to have the successful circularity of the refrigerant, circular economy of the refrigerant? Recovery is very easy. You take out the refrigerant and you put it in cylinders or bottles, but what to do with it? Where we get these cylinders from? So this is not, do we lease it? Should we own it? These are the challenges for the installer. Then how to transport those cylinders to wherever the transport needs to be done. Having the Hungarian example in mind, what you heard from Gabriela. So we have sometimes challenges with the legal frame in country. Then where to store refrigerant, if possible, to store the refrigerant by yourself at all. Do we have the place where we can take the refrigerant for further reuse or recycling, reclaiming, or destruction? What are the costs for the installer in such situation? Some easy things to think of is local regulation must be adapted to the premise that when we recover this refrigerant, so this refrigerant recovered from the unit is not a waste immediately. And this, when we have this perception, then things are becoming more easy. Then it becomes a valuable resource. So also what is important to enable installers, service people, to have easy handling with this recovered refrigerant, not to have the barriers, like, I don't know, when they have to transfer the refrigerant from the construction site to their warehouse, they cannot put it to the warehouse, they cannot transport it because there's hazardous waste. So those all small things are really improving the circularity of the refrigerant. And of course, it's important to motivate, to teach the installers to separate refrigerants. So every type of the refrigerant to have own cylinder, not to mix them all in one cylinder. How to start? Actually, we need to do a lot still on the market education. And I don't think, and I talk about your countries, but I'm also talking about European countries still. We still have work to do. Because the importance of this RRR processes are unmeasurable. Because of the environment protection, we are keeping the refrigerant in the systems where it belongs. We are reusing the resources, therefore we do not produce new refrigerant on the scales we normally would have. This is money saving. So overall, I think this is, it's very important, again, that the market recognizes that this is very useful. Of course, the certification, you know about it, in your country also functions. But the point is to control this F-gas certificates, which companies and people have. Then we have the possibility of having databases, electronic databases with equipment, which again needs to be controlled, databases with gas imports and exports. We have a good example in Poland. Professor Kozakiewicz already had a presentation of their databases. I think these are very useful. to know and to have. Then, of course, the updated legislation to enable and really support the circular economy of refrigerants like Hungary did. And also a lot of European countries EU countries should do it as well. It's not really, the Hungary is still one of few countries. Important to understand that refrigerant is not a waste, but a useful resource. As we see that in Hungary, they succeeded to do so. Of course, presence of the local facilities or local machines for recycling and maybe even reclamation is also helping. Depends on the quantities on the market and size of the market. But recycling machines are easy to use and definitely not that expensive as the big reclamation facilities. One information which I would like to pass in a meeting in Bangkok in October, there will be a workshop on refrigerant management, will be done by our colleague Hilde Dont as a part of life cycle refrigerant management. So this task force will be organizing the workshop. So I'm inviting you, if you are going there, to for sure visit and participate in the workshop to get the full information and to have an active discussion on that. So what could be the good practice? What are the good examples which we see also coming from the sales point of view? Enabling of use of recycling machines to local service companies is definitely helping. Not every service company can afford to have a recycling machine or even don't want to have a recycling machine. So putting this regionally by some bigger distributors, this could be a good idea. This is done in some Central European countries, and yeah, we are still getting used to having this, but as mentioned, the service of the units, yeah, it's very important. Service crews offer recycling on the spot. This is also a very important part of the sales argumentation. So the quality of the service could be the one. So we are also recycling for you. Cleaning the refrigerant can be a good advantage on the market from the sales point of view. And to organize, for example, equipment and even refrigerant take-back schemes where we are offering for the old units some kind of a voucher, because refrigerant inside, we are making sure that it's going to be recovered and reused. And of course, companies which collect such equipment are extracting the refrigerant and giving back again for a certain compensation. So centrally then refrigerant is collected and cleaned, regenerated in a way and put back to the market, or if not, this is not possible, properly disposed. So basically, one good example which Daikin has is Loop by Daikin project. So the project is about making sure that the big quantities of refrigerants are not lost somehow in the system, not destroyed, because also bigger accounts, the core business of the investors is not really to take care of the refrigerant, and sometimes then the refrigerant doesn't get reused, and it's very easy process to take these quantities and to clean and reuse it. So this Loop by Daikin is project which is offering to the bigger accounts with more refrigerant. Daikin takes care of the refrigerants, make sure that the refrigerant recovered, units replaced with the new equipment, so new equipment is done. This refrigerant is collected locally in bigger tanks. Then after the quantity is reached, then it's transported to the facility, cleaned, reclaimed, and then put back to the production, where in our case, we have complete lines of the products, the big lines of the products, which are only using this reclaimed refrigerant. So no new refrigerant, but reclaim the refrigerant. And this is the management, and this is the circular economy which we established in Europe. The second one is the project which is called Retradables. This Gabriele already mentioned a bit. Project co-funded by European Commission under the LIFE project. So the project aims to make sure also that the small quantities of refrigerant are not forgotten. So let's say the refrigerant ends up in certain cylinder or bottle with installer, and installer may not know really what to do with it, either to destroy it or to just store it. We had examples when we saw that installation companies were keeping the refrigerant for years stored in their warehouses, not knowing really what to do with them. We offer the possibility to put such refrigerant cylinders to the platform, kind of e-commerce platform, where on the other side are refrigerant distributors, which are then buying such refrigerant or taking such refrigerant, making it, collecting a bigger quantities, and then, of course, process, recycle or reclaim, and then put back to the market. So this is meant for the local, really local and local reuse of the refrigerants as such. Not to go, I already presented this, I think 2 years ago. Not to go to the details, the challenges which we are facing at the moment is really willingness of the installation companies to put the refrigerant on the platform, because simply they are not still used to, and we talk about European Union, and still not really used to process properly the refrigerant, make sure that the refrigerant is reused, to take the opportunity of this those schemes which we have. Not to forget that also this kind of refrigerant which is reclaimed or recycled, this is not part of the quota. So we can reuse it as over and over again, and this is not increasing or decreasing the quota which we have or in the portfolio of the company, for example. So this would be everything from my side. Thank you very much. And yeah, the idea is to pass really a good message to take care of the refrigerant throughout the life cycle, because we have huge quantities of refrigerant already on the market. It's much bigger from all the new quantities coming. And I think this bank of refrigerants already existing is really worth using, reusing, protecting the environment, at the same time saving money and reducing CO2 emissions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Hrvoje. Firstly, congratulations to Daikin for celebrating its 100th anniversary.
Thank you very much.
So quite an accomplishment. I enjoyed this interesting and relevant intervention with focus on the industry position. You noted the challenges for the successful circularity of refrigerants and the steps on what could be done, which I think could be of definitely of interest to many of the countries, because such questions tend to arise during regional meetings, also events, sessions, panel discussions, and the like. And yes, legislation is an important component, but also, you know, as you mentioned, the roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders during the sustainable life cycle of refrigerants. And this also goes back to Ms. Gabriela's presentation. And thanks for sharing the 2 trade-back schemes by Daikin. That was also quite interesting to hear. And before I turn towards any questions or comments, a brief comment by your colleague Hilde, who has your back. It's always good to have such colleagues. So
she's actually my boss.
Oh, well, even better, you know,
Even
that's
better, yeah,
where it
yeah.
starts or should start. So a small correction on one of the slides, that the TLRM task force is not the organizer of the LRM workshop in Bangkok coming up, but it is organized by the Ozone Secretariat. So just a little note on that.
Yeah.
And
My mistake.
I also didn't know that.
Yes. Okay. But it's good that you know it.
Well, yes, now it's out in the open. So thank you, Hilde, for that. Let me see if we have any.
We have Claudia. Claudia is raising her hand. So Claudia, maybe you can ask.
Claudia, yes, please.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. I was raising physically my hand because I don't see the
I saw you
here. Yeah. Thank you very much, Gabriela. Thank you, Hervé. Nice to see you both. I think I will have a short intervention because I want to raise an issue that is happening right now in the EU. So as you said, this reclaimed gas is not part of the quota system. So it's very tempting for the illegal traffickants to use actually the new label that actually helps them to relabel the cylinders with the reclaimed gas. And we have information that actually what is brought to the EU borders, it's actually illegal trafficking from our friends and very old customers, China and Turkey, and physically relabeled as reclaimed gas. So I think it is useful for you as industry to realize that actually they are using some of your information like the reclamation centers, and they put the address of your reclamation center and the contact details to have the label even more true than it should be. That's why we were actually started to realize that this is not okay in principle. Yeah. So basically, they found this new opportunity to introduce illegal quantities in Europe, but using this method.
Yeah, it might be a problem if it comes illegally to Europe, but basically, if you want to import any kind of gas to European Union, it's must have a quota. So for this, you have to have a quota. I was talking about the refrigerant, which is already in Europe, which you are reclaiming and recycling. Therefore, it's already initially was in the quota, so it doesn't use the quota again. But if you want to import reclaimed or recycled refrigerant to Europe, it consumes the quota. The problem which you are talking about is definitely there when it's smuggled to the Europe, and then all of a sudden appears as reclaimed refrigerant, which is definitely a threat to the whole process and whole the schemes. And indeed, we have to pay attention to that, that some, suspicious cylinders, some suspicious tanks do not appear as reclaimed without the origin. But also labeling of the cylinders and everything should be done really by the book, by F-gas regulation rules, and there also the source where it was reclaimed, everything should be mentioned. So I think by really monitoring this, I think we can decrease the potential risk. But I think the biggest problem will have our market surveillance people like inspectors. They will have to do a lot of efforts really to stop such practice. But thank you, Claudia. Yes.
May I advance a proposal to you as Daikin or the other companies that have reclamation center to share with us all the contact details from your reclamation center, to have like a very small database, maybe a document. And when we face this kind of cases, just contact you directly to confirm if the quantities were coming from you or not.
Yes, I think this can, well, I'm sure this can be done. Of course,
Okay.
of course,
Thank you.
of course.
Thank you.
I think a very good idea, Claudia. Always good ideas for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, great. That's how cooperation happens. So thank you for that. I will give the floor to Emilia, but before we do that, I see your hand up, Emilia. We have a question very quickly in the chat from Christoph. Is the platform already working? Any links that could be shared?
I'm sorry. I didn't hear the first part.
Is the platform that you presented already up and running? Is it working? And if
It's
so,
a pilot. It's a pilot in Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. Slovakia, we are not very successful yet, but there are things happening already in Czech Republic, partially also in Hungary, but we are still in the phase of the pilot project, so we do not expand it yet. But of course, we can share our experience about this. So I know Professor Kozakiewicz personally, so I will make sure that to pass the information.
thank you. So that will be done when available.
I see
And
Emilia is raising hands. So
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Hervé, for the excellent presentation.
thank
I
you.
think it touched upon everything that we are interested in this area. I have a question. Regarding the Daikin Reclamation Center, I think it was in Frankfurt.
Yes.
And what, as I noticed in the slide, it was only reclamation of the one component chemicals. What about the blends? Is there experience in regard the reclamation of the blends? Which, according to me, it is challenging for the country starting with this reclamation procedure.
So in Daikin Chemicals Europe, so in this Daikin facility, we are specialized in the blends actually, because this distillation process is separating the phases in the blends. So actually what we have, we can, if we have the container with the mix of the different refrigerants, of course, the legal ones, we are then separating them into the different columns. If you remember, I showed these big columns, and we are separating the refrigerants. Each one gets in the separate column, pure, like in the beginning, like in the virgin state. So basically, no problem of having the refrigerants mixed in the container. What we prefer, of course, always, because this is cheaper, this is easier to have the cylinders, the deliveries, the tanks with a single phase, but we are quite realistic, and this is usually not possible. If we talk about recycling, then the precondition is actually to have the refrigerant. You cannot recycle basically the refrigerants with more refrigerants inside easily. This is not that easy.
Thank you, Hervé. Sorry.
Yeah.
Actually, my question was, what is your experience in reclamation of the blends like 404A, 405C? That was my question.
What the reclamation? This is
Of
possible, and
blends.
this is being done. 407C, for example, which has 3 components, has R32, 125, and 134A. So this is easily done because each of those components, you don't get 407C at the end. You get R32 in one column, you get 125, R125 in the second one, and in the third one, you get 134A, pure separated. And then eventually, if you want, you can mix again in a tank and get whatever refrigerants you like. You can get R410A, or you can get R407C. What is also possible, we can extract ODS refrigerants, so R32, but we are not using this again because this is not allowed. I checked this with our, because I thought we could not do it, but I checked with our with the guys in Daikin Chemicals. They can separate R22, and then it's processed differently and turned into some other products, but not reused as a refrigerant because R22 in European Union is not allowed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that fruitful exchange. Something, and I will end with this, and we carry on with the next presentation, but something which caught my attention and is good to be reminded is that when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, distribution over the entire HVAC and our equipment life cycle, the greatest percentage, according to the information that you share, comes from their usage. And,
Exactly.
and this is due to the energy consumed. Hence here, the importance of energy efficiency of products. And this keeps coming back, and this is also something that needs to be acknowledged not only, but also dealt with in projects that are being implemented now and in the future, either as standalone projects on energy efficiencies, pilot projects, or part of KIPs as well. So with that, I also would like to just acknowledge the communication and comments happening in the chat. We have from EIA as well comments. So for those of you that are actively on, can follow that along as well. But for the interest of time, I would like to now carry on with our last expert speaker that we have here today. And we have Mr. Krzysztof Grzegorczyk. He is the president of the board at Prozon, the Foundation for Climate Protection in Poland. So currently, Prozon Foundation is the only entity in Poland performing the regeneration of fluorinated greenhouse gases, and by improving the technology and searching for new solution. And this also to introduce modern pro-environmental solutions in the field of refrigerant management. And here maybe I will note the slogan, we cool without warming the climate. So that's nice. Mr. Krzysztof has ample experience, and we're eager to hear what he has prepared for us today on the topic of life cycle approach to refrigerants, experiences from Poland on the RRR refrigerant waste and destruction options. Thank you for your patience, Krzysztof, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Natasha, for the introduction. A very kind introduction. Thank you, Halvard and Natasha, for the invitation for this meeting, and to all of you for finding a time to join this meeting and also listen to my presentation.
Chris, we don't see the slides yet. Maybe you're working on it.
It says I'm sharing the screen. I will try to do this one more time. I still see the slide of Hervoje, so maybe if Hervoje, if you stop sharing your presentation, my presentation will be seen.
Actually, you all have the right to share screen, but let's try it. If you're unable to, I will try from my end.
Yeah, because I still see the presentation of Daikin.
Just a moment. Let's try this. Okay. You should, yeah, you have co-host rights, but just to facilitate, I can share it from my end if you'd like.
Oh, no, I think it's now I should be fine.
It's okay?
Do you see my presentation?
Are you sharing, or because I'm also sharing it? Okay, let's see.
I'm sharing. Yes, I'm sharing.
We don't see on the platform, or at least I'm not seeing it. Can we confirm, Halvard?
Actually, yes, I can see it. I can see Chris' screen. It shows it sharing Chris' screen. So I think you can proceed, Chris.
Perfect. Thank you.
So you mean you see my presentation, do you?
Yes, the first slide we can see.
Okay, great. So we start with the first slide. Okay. Thank you.
There it is. Okay.
Yes? Good.
Good.
So, okay, a background for this presentation will be a little bit repeating what you've seen in the last presentation, you know, the life cycle of refrigerant, but okay, it will be a little bit different perspective, more from the practical point of view. And we will be talking about refrigerants. So in a simple classification, we're talking about refrigerants that are ozone depleting substances. As Prozon, we started in CFC's time. So actually 25 years ago, Prozon started activity. Then we had to work with HCFCs. And like 10 years ago, the release on using HCFCs in refrigeration was stopped. So from that time, we are just dealing with F-gases. There are easy to manage F-gases like 134A, single component. And we discussed a bit about mixtures before that are more difficult to reclaim and to handle. In those mixtures, we have to say that we can have two different types of refrigerants, like 404, which is azeotropic, and 507 that is azeotropic. So it's easier to keep the composition with all the refrigerants starting with 5. Alternative refrigerants, we're dealing as an example with propane, carbon dioxide, ammonia, and of course new offer to the market, which are HFOs. The green color refrigerants, they do not require reclamation, except I would say HFOs that we already dealing with this reclamation of 1234A YF as an example. But our objective full focus is now on F-gases. The historical approach is that we, after 100 years of different changes, we're coming back to so-called natural refrigerants that were in 30s were replaced with CFCs that presented a lot of advantages, safety, availability, acceptable pressures. But then, of course, we had a Montreal Protocol. We had a middle step to use HCFCs. And then I remember those time because I was introducing also after HFCs, we were introducing HFCs. And I think that it was a kind of a little bit wasting of time. And whoever now is the ban, there is a ban on HCFCs or phasing out. It's absolutely all the technology to go back to natural refrigerants without this middle step. I think it's a perfect opportunity. We, as Europe, we went through the process from HCFCs to natural refrigerants via a huge amount of greenhouse gases like HFCs. So it's good to skip this step. Recovery, I mean, this definition from European regulations 517 in bold at simplification of recovery is just the process when we take the product from air conditioning or heat pump or refrigeration unit and we put this to a cylinder. Cylinders should be specially marked, should have a special valve, and this is differentiating product virgin or purified product to use from the product that is recovered. So wherever you introducing a 3R network, make sure that you introducing a proper cylinders to service network. Reclamation is generally saying removing impurities above AHRI 700 standards. This standard was already mentioned. We don't have European standard, and this standard, I have to confirm, it's good enough. Recycling, it's a process that I interpret that is basic cleaning, removing basic impurities. Of course, we don't know the outcome of this recycling process. We can imagine that the recycling process can be a small filter and huge amount of very humid, or not humid, it's not the right word, but with a lot of water, refrigerant. And of course, such a process of recycling is not improving the quality of the recycling process at all. And unfortunately, we don't have simple measures to test the results of basic cleaning. Construction, incineration, actually, that's we destroying the particles of greenhouse gases and making ambient substances or molecules, we can say. So life cycle of refrigerants you have seen, we're starting with a refrigerant that is a quality product, should be quality product. We're charging this to the equipment. As it was mentioned in the Daikin presentation, 79% depends on the emission of greenhouse gases is during the process of using the equipment in operation. So what is the consumption? The consumption is the quality of the equipment, but it's also a quality of refrigerants. So that's why our perspective is that the quality of refrigerant that we put in the system is extremely important to the long lasting of the equipment and also the effect on the environment. Process of recovery sometimes is very simple, sometimes it's more complicated, especially in the industrial systems, but usually average service person has a knowledge how to do this and has an obligation, because having a certificate, he has to pass the exam that he knows how to use the recovery machines and recovery cylinders. When we coming to the laboratory tests, I will say a few words about those tests required, but this is the moment when we're taking a decision. Should we put back the refrigerant back to the unit? We can reclaim, or we have to go for incineration. Reclamation process is the process we're using. It's called distillation, but indeed distillation is more a different process when we're separating the refrigerants. But that's the term we use very often in the equipment that are widely used for reclamation. Then the product has to go back to the lab, and the lab using ARI methods is giving a certificate, and the product with the quality of the virgin product is going back to the system. Okay, a few pictures. The installations can be absolutely different. That's a huge industrial installation that holds more than 1 ton of refrigerant. supermarkets now more and more switching to natural refrigerants, and big distribution centers, freezing chambers, and a lot of equipment with small amounts of refrigerants. Those are the sources of the refrigerant. Emilia, your hand is to me. You would like to ask me now? Raised hand of Emilia.
Sorry, I forgot. No,
problem.
sorry.
Okay. I thought you want to ask. If somebody wants to ask the question in the middle of my presentation, please feel free to do this. Okay, process of recovery. You can see a different type of the recovery machines, different types of the packaging we're using for recovering. And I wanted to say two words about the team of Prozon. It's always good, and I'm always recommending that reclamation center is having own service personnel to do the difficult evacuations. So, and our team is busy all the time. As standard service people do not take this challenge of recovering refrigerant from every installation. The lab has to take a sample. You can see Martina taking a sample, and then a set of different parameters according to standard has to be performed. On this picture, you see the testing. This is a Carl Fisher equipment to do the analysis of the moisture. You can see the composition of refrigerant in multi-component refrigerants. You have to use a gas chromatograph, and for the you can see on the right the printout from Carl Fisher, when you can see the amount of water before reclamation. So this is an example of reclamation equipment. This is a kind of distillation, cleaning, condensing. We're removing non-condensable gases that are increasing a lot of the pressure inside the equipment and are dangerous for the equipment, for long lasting of the compressor. And next, after removing the impurities, we have to add missing components when we're talking about multi-component refrigerants. We have to homogenize before we take the sample, and we're repeating the process as long as we're reaching the ARI standard. So we're testing in the lab. When the product is going back to the lab, we're testing a nominal composition, water content, acidity, high boiling residues, chlorides, non-condensable gases, and solid parts. On the picture to the left, you can see two types of GC, gas chromatographs. This one is 5 years old, and this one is micro gas chromatograph, good enough for the reclamation center that is starting their operation. Today, Prozon, we're using 3 other equipment, but this is an excellent equipment for start. Quality after product reclamation, we're bringing the right composition, and we're bringing the quality in terms of the water content also below 10 ppm, which is an ARI standard. Last year, it's a brand new investment of Prozon. And we actually coming to the point of my presentation. Part of this reclamation process that we were not able to perform before is something that happens in Daikin in Frankfurt, is an installation to separate products. We have a little bit different approach than Daikin, but we're not separating to single components, but we just removing additions that are not necessary in the equipment, which is, from our point of view, less energy consuming, and sometimes it's one product that is unnecessary, unwanted in the equipment, in the refrigerant, recovered refrigerant, and having those two methods of distillation and adsorption, we can remove this. But I will show this picture back again when we will be talking about some trading of the recovered gas. Of course, there is a lot of logistics. The product has to come from the market to the plant and has to go back to the market. But the good stuff is that this is a quality product. I would say sometimes better than the virgin product. We confirm with the certificate of conformity, and we showing all the required by the ARI standard parameters. We don't release the product to the market without breaching the minimums, those standards. And now is this invitation for the invitation for this meeting somehow was a trigger to think about a special offer that we in Poland can give to other markets without limits in incineration or in reclamation of refrigerants. So actually, we're starting from the left. The question is, what can we do with collected refrigerant waste? And we have a mix of refrigerant in, it can be an ISO tank, 1 ton container, or cylinders. The only requirement should be that all those packagings have a P mark, which is required in European. It's a safety standard. The other requirement, so the P standard for the packaging is required. Actually, I would say it's good to be because then it's make the transportation within European Union easier. Okay, maybe it's not necessary. And then we have TFS. It's just a documentation. We're saying about the refrigerants to be a dangerous waste, and then this transfrontier shipment of waste. Natasha mentioned another term for this, which is transborder permit, and this is a document that shipper has to have it. And then by rail, truck, or a sea vessel can be moved to Poland. Prozon can do the laboratory tests, and we're coming to the point from the previous graph that this is the decision moment, and then we can do 3 things with this. We have to decide: can we reclaim this? If we cannot directly, we cannot give this product directly to reclamation process, then we're using a rectification and adsorption process, separate to components. Or we see difficulty and limits in the equipment we're using. and this product has to go for the destruction. What next? So reclamation, of course, it's a process of removing oil and impurities. Separation is removing unwanted components. Both of processes we have to complete with a quality certificate. And of course, destruction is a completely different option. But luckily, we are lucky in Poland that we have installation that can do this. So we are in perfect situation. Prozon is in a perfect situation. Now we can do all those three processes, have those processes completed. I'm showing again this plant in close to our capital, close to Warsaw. Some of the participants of these meetings had an opportunity to see this already. I'm very glad, and I would like to share this happiness of having this with all of you. So if you would like to see such installation and operation, then you are invited. So we're calling this a 4R plant, which is a little bit extension of 3R plant, right? And 3R network. So we start talking about recovery, reclamation, rectification, and end of the day, it's going back to the market and it's reuse. It's the term that's a close circular economy, or so anyhow, this is the process where this the mix of refrigerant from any of worldwide countries can be treated. And I want to show you the other plant, which is plant called Sarpi and belongs to Veolia, which is quite a global operator of such installations. And this is a rotary kiln incineration plant. And excuse me, we still have some construction works next to me. Excuse me very much. I'm sorry. So this few words, I will not go into details about rotary kiln incineration, but I will leave this in the presentation. So once sharing this, you can have a look. It was mentioned from looking to from the end that incineration is conducted in above 1000 degrees centigrade. This is widely used process for different substances, also hazardous substances, and can be propelled with oil, propane, or natural gas. So this is a quite modern and efficient installation. Getting prepared for this presentation, I looked to COPA documents, and they presenting a whole list of different installations of reclamation around the world. I believe that there was a number of 179 reclamation places around the world. The biggest amount is in Japan, but in Europe we still have some installation. And there is also a list of all the places where you can destroy the mixtures of CFCs or HCFCs. Okay, so I made a small map so you can see Poland and those two installations, one for separation of refrigerants, of mixture of refrigerant, and Sarpi place 300 kilometers. So we are quite, I would say, cost effective And we also having a harbor in Gdańsk where the shipments of the product can come. By the way, I will use this moment to say what are the key success factors for 3R networks. Always saying, even talking recently to some colleagues, I said, no legislation, no reclamation. But so anyhow, and I mean, from our experience, we know that basic legislations is required. And it was also in Daikin presentations, this aspect was strongly elaborated. Reclamation center, dedicated laboratory, and incineration facility. So we have all those 4 components necessary in Poland, luckily. Pool of equipment for recovery, number of equipment for recovery. I believe in my country there is thousands of recovery machines and several thousands of special cylinders for recovery. Collection points helps. On the pictures, you can see some points around the country that are collecting refrigerant and sending to the reclamation plant. It's treated as a dangerous waste, but we still handling this, even with this tough regulation, we don't have too much problems of transporting this and handling this. So logistics is always necessary. Technical training for personnel, that's quite obvious. People have to also understand, I mean, the operators, users, what's in their equipment. And all this system should be related to some profits to the beneficiaries and stakeholders of the process. Coming back to what we can do with the products from the countries that do not have the full opportunity to manage refrigerants. So we can import through via sea to Gdańsk. Then we offering testing services. Based on the lab test, we can classify the product for different processes. Destruction is processed by Sarpi Veolia. Prozon is collecting refrigerants. And for most of refrigerants recovered, we pay something around $10. In extreme cases, we go above $10. But the product has to be reclaimable. If the product has to be requires more expensive processes like rectification, then the payment is smaller, it's just $5 per kilo. And when we're talking about the costing of incineration, it's a cost. It's not a benefit to. So to make it more clear, I have to say that due to the European regulation and quota systems, all the refrigerants now reach very high prices. Because of this, if we can do reclamation, reclaim the product, we pay a company that is bringing the product to us more or less $10 per kilogram. If this has to be separated and then reclaimed or the other way, then it's a benefit of $5. And the destruction, the cost of this is $5 per kilo. I've seen in some documents of Natasha that show that there was a cost, much higher, above $8 per kilo. But I believe it can be even lower. So the final conclusion from my thoughts is that for the countries not having a full infrastructure to handle refrigerants, Poland can be a good option. If the product is a product that can be reclaimable and still go back to the market, and I'm talking now only HFCs, then the money received for the product can cover collection and transport costs. And this is the concept, actually. This is the point of my presentation. And also the point is, which is a little bit different that was before, that was still on Natasha's presentation, that the separation ODS from non-ODS is not feasible or is not worth money. But I'm showing a little bit different approach that it makes sense, and this can limit the cost of incineration and managing those. So we came to the point that finally I will say a few words about Prozon, and I will give a stage to the questions. So we are foundation. It's a self-financed non-government organization. We started, now it's more than 27 years, but we are fully dedicated to air conditioning and energy sector. We working with 3,000 companies, not only in Poland. Several thousand of special cylinders we put in the market. The history is much more than 2,000 tons of refrigerants collected. 3,000 personnel trained. I said about certification and the need for training. So we are also the training center. We also, for other training centers, we do the accredited examination. And we working for energy sector with also training those guys with SF6 certificate. More than 60 employees now working for Prozon. We, as a foundation, we report to the Ministry of Environment and Climate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for that insightful presentation. It was nicely mentioned that when we talk about life cycle of refrigerants and also what could be done with the collected refrigerant waste, there is decision taking. And this is something maybe that's not always verbally expressed, and that there are certain options available depending on the state of this refrigerant, which usually coincides with laboratory testing processes if needed. So I'm sure that our participants today are thankful for this info related to the key success factors for the RRR network in particular. And congratulations to Prozon, and with that to Poland for the reclamation and separation plant, the 4R plant, the recovery, reclamation, rectification, and reuse. Before I go into the questions, and we do have a few actually, let me just see, we have 2 hands up. Halvard, maybe you'd like to take the floor first?
Yeah, thank you, Natasha, and thank you very much, Chris, for sharing all your expertise. 4 very quick questions or comments. First one, do you have an idea of the cost of the microgas chromatograph which you mentioned? Second question is, can you confirm that Poland can still import recovered substances for reclaim and destruction? I had a recollection that it was not anymore allowed some years ago. The third question is, it was something new for me, where there is rectification as a separate process. So for you, that is different from reclaim, or is rectification part of reclaim? And the last thing is just a comment. You mentioned the $8 which we indicated in the fact sheet, which we produced on our regional destruction project some years ago with jointly with UNIDO and UNEP. This $8 include the overall cost spent under the project, including transport, administrative processes, collection, storage, and so on. So that's much more than only the cost of destruction. That's all. Thanks again, Chris.
Yeah. Maybe starting from the end, maybe, yeah, it looks like I said this, and we were not comparing apples to apples. Yeah, probably your cost is including logistics, and I mentioned only about the incineration process. So yeah, including logistics can be definitely around the numbers you mentioned. The separation process is different from the reclamation, because reclamation that is widely done around the world is just a cleaning process, and and there is actually only few facilities around. I mean, according to COPA, 179 reclamation facilities around the globe. To my knowledge, it's distillation towers, separation. It's just few of this. In Europe, I know just 4 such installations. So separation is actually what Hervoje said, splitting the mixture to components, or what I said is removing one of the components. So we have additional refrigerant that we don't need, and then we can remove this. And we cannot do this in a standard, let's call it standard reclamation process. Coming back to import, we can import those products within the quota if there are HFCs. So this is the requirement. And as far as I know, SARPI is still receiving the refrigerants. I spoke to them about this concept, and I had no information that, okay, stop it, we will not receive it. So I cannot answer you 100%, but preparing this presentation for you guys, I was in contact with SARPI. So I will verify and I will come back to you, Albert.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Before we go to Claudia, and I see her hand up, let me just read one of the questions we have here in the chat. Please clarify, Chris, if delivery in ISO tanks to Prozon can include mixtures of different refrigerants, including various HFCs and R22.
Yes, when it can be done, then we can test it and we take the decision. Yes, the ISO tank is acceptable.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And just a very quick note as information. So under the EU Waste Electrical Electronic Equipment Directive, recovery of propane, R290, and other hydrocarbons is also mandatory. So this just is information in the chat. Thank you for that, Hilde. And Claudia, if I can ask a favor, if we can hold on to your question, please. We have Liana from NOU Armenia, who has another engagement coming up very soon. And we'd like to give the floor to her to briefly say a few words on the status of this project in Armenia, and then we'd come back to you, please. Thanks. Liana?
Yes. Hello, everybody, and apologies for kind of intervening into this very hot question and answer session. First of all, I would like to take 1 minute to say thank you to Daikin and to Prozon. To Daikin for being very generous with us and sending Vladimir Orovnitsky from Daikin Slovakia last year to hold an amazing training with our vocational students. So I just can't miss this opportunity. And then also my thanks would go to Prozon for hosting Armenia's delegation last year in December. And I would like to thank OzonAction for funding this study tour. And we were very lucky to visit this 4R reclamation plant in Mshonov, and that was an amazing and very impressive plant. Thank you very much. And now I will just brief you on the implementation of our project. And I will send the presentation that will be shared with all the participants later, because we are going beyond the agenda, beyond the allocated timing, and we have another event coming in 45 minutes at the university, where we will be launching an ISO standard related to the competence of personnel. So my apologies on that. Overall, the project is going smoothly. It is on track. We are collecting data. We are mapping the stakeholders. We have completed the legislation overview. And in our legislation, there is no single provision that would deal directly with the waste of refrigerants, but there is sufficient background legislation on waste management, waste treatment that would allow elaborating the national legislation further to cover HFC and ODS refrigerants. Data collection is pending. Is ongoing. We are halfway. We have visited 5 provinces out of 10, and we are collecting data. We have addressed the issues of laboratories, the national capacities in terms of analyzing refrigerants or waste of controlled substances. Unfortunately, none of the laboratories has currently the capacities to do so. So that's probably in brief the overall picture, and the presentation will be shared with you later. Thank you.
Thank you, Liana, for this comprehensive overview of the status being done in Armenia. So quite a lot of activities happening, and wish you all the best in continuing forward.
Thank you.
Any questions for Liana while we still have her on the call before we turn back to Chris and Claudia? Mimosa from Albania, Liana would like to know what data collection methodology is being applied in Armenia.
We are using COPAS data collection methodology that we are using COPAS guidelines, and these mainly include collection of data from open sources and data collection through official letters and on-site data collection and analysis.
Thank you for that. I think that answers the question. Any other questions for Liana? Okay, I don't see anything in the chat or hands raised. Thanks once again, Liana, for sharing those insights with us, and have a great event at the university.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and apologies, I must be off.
Thanks. Going back now to Chris and Claudia, apologies for that short interruption, and also the fact that we are going over time for this meeting, but we felt that it's quite an important topic, and there is ample of discussion happening, which is a good opportunity at the moment, as we don't know when this topic will be again on the agenda as an online event. So if we can have Claudia back online, please, with her inquiry or comment.
Sure, thank you very much. Actually, my question is related to one of the Halvar's question in relation to this rectification. I'm not an expert in procedures and very into depth, but I have a question. If I have quantity of refrigerant and this is rectified by the rectification, what is the status of that refrigerant? Can be used directly? Is it, what is the status of the refrigerant actually? What can you do with that? You have to follow the other procedures, or you can use it as it is after you apply this rectification? It's the first time where I'm hearing this term, so I'm not sure exactly how to interpret this. Thanks.
Christoph, are you with us? If you'd like to take that question. I see him online. Maybe we give him a moment. Or if anybody else would like to technically explain for me as well, this term, I have seen it before, but not also sure how it fits into this. So it's a great question. Thanks, Claudia, for raising it. Any of our audience members would like to enlighten us with? Okay. So maybe Claudia, we come back to you bilaterally. If we don't have anyone, Emilia would like to take the floor.
I think that we need also the explanation of this term. No, but bilaterally, please include us in the discussion and in the explanation. Thank you.
So that has been noted, but I'm afraid that we don't have Christoph maybe available at the moment. Also, we don't have inputs from the other participants who might have been able to, there he is, saving the day. So welcome back. Did you hear the question from Claudia regarding the rectification process, and what exactly does that contain, how it is different, and in terms of the status of refrigerants vis-a-vis other processes?
Rectification process is separation of refrigerants using a distillation column. This is quite well-known process when you have different evaporation temperatures for the different components, and then you can separate the on a kind of a shelves. You can separate products with lower evaporation temperatures from the higher evaporation temperature. So this is just a separation of mix of refrigerants.
Okay, and let me just clarify here. So it would not be the same as reclaimed?
Reclamation process is a process of cleaning the refrigerant from water, oil. It's not a process of separating refrigerants. Of course, end of the day, we can say that separation is part of reclamation process. But before separation of refrigerants came, we had a limit of reclaiming refrigerants, and the limits were to the good composition of refrigerants. No additional components in the refrigerant. Standard reclamation process do not remove unnecessary refrigerants in the mixture.
Okay. Thank you for that. Does that satisfy Claudia and Emilia?
Sounds even more complicated than it was. So, but yes, now I understand. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Christoph, for being available to take on that question. I don't see, oh, I see one more hand going up now. Omer Erdal. Would you
Hi,
like to?
can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well. Go ahead.
My name is Ömer Erdal, a member of Turkish NOU. I want to ask a question, Christo. We know Prozon is the one of the biggest RRR company I know in Europe, and we are really curious to visit maybe in any time to a company. First, I want to say, really, we are curious to visit. I have a question about reclamation process. Is reclamation process is the same with ODS and the F-gases? Is there any differences between them in reclamation process? Firstly, the second question is, are you carrying the waste F-gases or the ODS waste by yourself, or do the companies bring the wastes to your company?
Of course, I mean, there is less and less of ODSs in the products we're getting for to manage the waste. But as a result, we have a kind of a bank of R22. So this can be used for essential purposes, or I can export this as well. The difference between reclamation of ODSs and non-ODSs is actually there is no difference. The first equipment, the reclamation equipment, we purchased 25 years ago, and we still using this equipment. So actually, there is no difference in the equipment for R12, R22, or 134A. That's the same equipment.
I think you can carry out all the issues in the same factory, I think.
Yes.
And the second, maybe what about the carrying procedure of the wastes of F-gas and ODS from companies? I think you are not carrying the waste. The companies are bringing to your company or the firm.
Do they bring ODSs to my company? No, I'm not sure.
Is the waste brought to your company to Prozon directly?
Yes, both ODSs and HFCs are treated as a waste. What I cannot process, I'm sending to the incineration facility, to SARPI.
In the first stage, in the first stage, the wastes are came to your, I think, company by producers, I think, waste producers, I think. I'm trying to ask the question.
Maybe we can facilitate this also bilaterally, Omer. We can definitely have a contact and we can exchange that information. But please, Christoph, if you'd like to answer it now, you may do so before we close the meeting.
I really didn't get the point on this last question.
Can I jump? Actually, I think Mr. Ömer wants to ask about the collection of waste before the decision of reclamation, rectification, or incineration. He's asking the collection of waste. Who collects this waste? You or any other company?
Yeah. Of course, recovery is doing mainly service companies. Then they have option to bring it directly to Prozon or to any of the collection points we have in the country. So this is the system, can go directly or through the collection points. And we have registered such a receiving of the waste and report also the transportation time of such a moving the equipment. But the collection is in 80–90% done directly by us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
But of course, if there's anything additional, we can facilitate that. So thank you for those inputs, and to Chris for answering that. I would like to hand the floor now to Halvard, maybe for the closing remarks. Halvard, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. I was not planning to speak. I just would like to thank all the speakers for their very excellent presentations. Also, Natasha, for your very good facilitation, and to our interpreters, Liana and Aram. I think we went over half an hour, but it was doing so. And Natasha, I think you can conclude the meeting. It was a very nice meeting, very good attendance. Thanks to all participants for their active contribution. There's
Thank you, Halvard.
A question from Lasha. You have seen it? Okay.
Question from Lasha in the chat, is it? I don't see in the chat, or maybe
Sorry, no,
Lasha.
he's raising his hand.
Then please take the floor, Lasha.
Yeah. Thank you for the interesting presentations, first of all. And if time allows, I want to ask one question, which maybe relates to the previous one. The question is simple. This refers to the RRR scheme, and I'm just interested who pays for it? Is it service companies, which certified companies and technicians, or this is a holder of the equipment from which the refrigerant is recovered? So maybe this question refers not only Christoph, but also Gabriela, if of course, if she's still us. Thanks.
Should I answer first? As I mentioned, the prices of refrigerants are very high in Europe. So we making money. End of the day, that's we're using a standard business case. We paying 10 and we selling for 20. So this is the to cover the cost of the reclamation. So end of the day, in the price of the refrigerant is the cost of getting the reclaimed product, recovered product, and the cost of reclamation. So end user is paying.
Lasha, any follow-up to that, or that satisfies?
Yes, thank you. Maybe Gabriela will also provide some input.
There are different cases in case of Hungary or Hungarian case study. Installers can take over by an agreement from the unit owner the recovered refrigerant. They usually do not pay for the refrigerant in this case. They recover the refrigerant, and the reclamation can be a service in Hungary. That means that they can keep the ownership of the recovered refrigerant, get it reclaimed, and they still own the refrigerant, the reclaimed refrigerant. That means they can use it for another client, for another unit, for service activities. That's the main point of this circular economy, and the main point of the whole scheme, which has been or the decree which has been modified in Hungary. There are, of course, other opportunities as well. For example, retail. We experience in case of retail clients and retail businesses that they tend to keep the refrigerant for themselves, also get it reclaimed, and also use it for their units or REC HP bank. That also means that, for example, there are already some retail clients who are for 404A refrigerant banked in case they need it, for example, in the future to use it. Does it answer your question, or you need more clarification?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
That was very useful. Thank you for that, and to Lasha for the question. And also from Hilde, many thanks for the information on regenerate terminology of refrigerants. So in the TEEP LRM report on page 24, there it lists available reclamation technologies. So you can have a look at that document, which is in the chat, and a link was provided, so you can read a little bit more on that for those of you interested. I don't see any questions, hands raised or in the chat, and thank you, Halvard, for giving us the closing from my end too. Many thanks for the excellent thoughts and the contributions in the last hour and almost 40 minutes. We're pleased to have had you with us here and for this useful exchange. A round of applause for our excellent expert speakers for their insights, knowledge, and information sharing. And for many of you, I know that you're away at the moment attending conferences, so thank you for finding the time and enlightening us on this topic today. So all the best to everybody, and with that, we close this session. So keep well.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Natasha. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the interpreters as well.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming. Nara, we can stop the recording, I think.